Hi, welcome to 100 Hikes in Utah video blog. I'm Rhett Olson, co-author of 100 Hikes in Utah, and tonight we'll be talking about Horseshoe Canyon, hike number 83.
Hi, I'm Steve Mann. I'm Rhett's co-author on the book 100 Hikes in Utah, and tonight we're going to, as Rhett introduced, we're going to talk about Horseshoe Canyon. We're not really going to give you details about the hike itself. That's in the book. But we're going to add color and tell you why it's an interesting hike and some of the things that we remember as being giving us the most impression about the hike. So Rhett, why don't you start with a summary of what you think, why would we recommend our listeners, viewers go to Horseshoe Canyon?
Sure. Horseshoe Canyon has a phenomenal wall of rock art. I mean, I remember it being at least 100 feet or so of just panel after panel of pictographs and Native American, rock art. Yeah. And so I think for anyone who's interested in that kind of stuff, it's not a real hard hike. You got to go down the canyon a couple hundred feet, and then it's just walking through a wash. But there are several panels, including the Great Gallery,
right,
that include just spectacular rock art.
Right. If I remember, the National Park Service says that the Great Gallery is, if not the largest, certainly one of the largest panels of Native American rock art in North America. And there are some of the figures that are 6, 7, 8 feet tall, and there's probably, I don't know, there 100 or more different figures there. So as you mentioned, over a span of, I think it's maybe even 200 or 300 feet wide.
Yeah, it was huge. In fact, one of the panels that stood out to me is called the Holy Ghost panel, and the figure, if you're able to get up close to it, is actually where the artist had taken and blown the ink, the pigment, out of a reed, so it gives it kind of a translucent or a lighter feel to the.
It's kind of ethereal.
Yeah, a much lighter feel, or ghost, hence the name, the Holy Ghost panel, to this huge figure, and then has a few others on the side.
Yep. This is, if I remember, one of the things I remember, we were fortunate when we went there to get that there was a ranger, park ranger there. And normally on a hike in a national park, there's not a whole lot of advantage to having a ranger. But in this one, the ranger was able to give us a whole lot of details, explain different panels, why some of the things that happened, what significance they had. And I thought that was very valuable and very interesting.
Yeah.
For example, one of the panels that we'll show is, well, actually several, but we have one picture that shows where the eyes and the feet of some of the figures have been pocked out. And when I first saw them, before the ranger explained it, I thought there'd been some vandalism, somebody had been shooting at them with a rifle or something. And instead the ranger told us that to the native peoples then, the figures had sort of spiritual power, and one way to kill the spiritual power, if you will, was to knock out the eyes and the feet. So you'll see a number of the figures that have that defacing done, but it was done back in the native people's times.
Sure. Speaking of defacing, one of the memories that I have of being there was was a series of mountain goats that were white, and which was odd because most of the others were well, most of the figures are actually pictographs, but these were petroglyphs where they had been etched into the stone, and the etchings were white. And so when we asked about that, he actually explained that there was a National Geographic photographer that was there and had gone in with some chalk to enhance his photographs and actually spread chalk inside the etchings. And so that was actually a more contemporary defacement of the art.
In National Geographic's defense, I think he told us that that was back in the 50s or 60s when putting chalk on the rock art probably wasn't seen as being politically incorrect or whatever. So nowadays I'm sure they wouldn't do that. But yeah, that was at least 40, 50 years ago, and the chalk marks are still there.
Sure.
So I guess that's a good example of why we don't mess with the rock art.
Sure. Along with the Great Gallery, there were several other panels along the hike that you'll want to stop at. several other panels that are up higher. You may want to take binoculars or some other kind of device for viewing those types
Those
of.
are a little harder to see when they're up high.
Right.
Yep.
And the hike is about 3 miles in,
And 3 back.
and then 3 back up.
One other thing that I remember that was interesting for us about the hike that I recall, we hiked in, seems like it was in the fall, late fall, October-ish or so, back around in the early 2000s, and we got to the logbook, which is there in a military metal
Like an
container,
ammunition box, yeah.
box, and we were looking through the logbook and we read an entry. It was actually, a couple paragraphs, if I recall, from some people who had spent the night at the Great Gallery on December 31st, 1999, during the Y2K rollover. And that was just an interesting side thing that I remember, that the people described how, some of you may not recall that, but there was a lot of concern whether there was going to be computer shutdowns and all these things, and they talked about they had no idea what was happening out there, but they were there in the canyon just looking at the stars and grateful that they could ignore the happenings in the rest of the world while they just were alone there in the canyon.
Right. Another experience that we had, and I think we'll show this in the pictures, is in the morning, I believe we camped there at the trailhead, just slept in the car, and then the next morning we heard the chuckers outside of the car. So we spent several minutes chasing chuckers around trying to get a good picture. They were quite elusive, but that was one of our first experiences playing with the chuckers. That was kind
I
of
think
good
that
time.
was the only place we saw chuckers in all of our hiking in the state, wasn't it?
That I was thinking that we saw some in Blue Mountain, but that may have just been the turkeys.
I think that was wild turkeys,
Yeah.
if I recall.
So anyway, so watch for the chuckers when you're at Horseshoe Canyon. So
One other just interesting side note, you won't really see anything, but for those of you that are familiar with the story of Aaron Ralston and Blue John Canyon, Aaron Ralston is the guy who had to cut off his arm with a pocket knife to get out of the canyon when a boulder fell on his arm. Horseshoe Canyon is actually the exit canyon from Blue John. When he made his final rappel, there was people in Horseshoe Canyon that found him and got him out and rescued him, I guess, if you want to say. He was sort of rescuing himself.
sure.
But just another interesting sidelight about Horseshoe Canyon and the area there.
Well, anything else that you can think of that we?
Those are my main memories from an site, things that I can remember, points of interest. So
Right. So we'll I think we'll end there. And just a reminder, if you want more information about the book, go ahead and check out the link on the website. We'll also have a few links to hopefully to trails.com. You can find digital downloads of the trail hike. It's hike number 83 inside the book, but I know that you can get all of the directions, and also remind you that you can purchase the book from us off the website, and if you do that, we'll make a personalized signed copy for you. So we'll take it from there. Thanks.